to coaching. It's really tremendous. So thanks for making it. Tell us about the genesis of it. How did you start?
Well, like I was saying in the beginning, I make social issue documentaries in Oakland, California. Obviously, Steph Curry, they moved to San Francisco, but they're rooted in Oakland for many years. I have started a company with Ryan Coogler, who I met when I was making The Waiting Room. The Waiting Room had just come out, and Ryan was shooting a film called Fruitvale Station. And Oscar Grant, who's a young black man who was shot by bar police, was born and later died at Highland Hospital. Ryan was trying to get access to the hospital, couldn't get access. Somebody at San Francisco Film Society was like, "You should meet Pete. Like, maybe he can help you." And we helped him get in there so they could shoot the scenes for Fruitvale. And we just stayed in touch. And then obviously he went on to direct a few movies, Creed, Black Panther, among others.
I heard of that.
Yeah, you heard of that one? And so he was doing his thing while I was sort of doing the trilogy. And we'd always stayed in touch and talked about collaborating on something. And the time came for him to start this company, and I had pitched him kind of loosely, like, "Hey, you should do nonfiction," because at the time, this is pre-COVID, more and more people were discovering nonfiction. More people were coming into the theaters to watch nonfiction. And so he asked me to come, run the nonfiction department at his company. And right around that time, Steph had reached out to his company, Unanimous Media, reached out to us about this idea for film. And I think, as you saw in the film, he had tried to get his college degree. It was a promise that he had made to his mom. He had tried to do it once before during the NBA lockout, couldn't do it. His kids were getting older, and he felt that he wanted to kind of make the film for them, in a way, and for his mom. And it wasn't his life story. It wasn't like The Last Dance. It wasn't like he was like, okay, because he's still playing. He's still an active player. It was his coming of age story, and also about potentially this promise. So it was a story about family. It was a story about community, and all those themes really attracted me. And I could see the potential in not knowing whether he could accomplish this goal. Like, that was a little bit of a curiosity, but it was going to be fundamentally about Davidson's community that helped kind of raise him in a way. It's about mentorship, family for sure, but also about the power of mentorship and the power of being seen. And you think about somebody like Oscar Grant, who tragically was killed by the police because he was not seen as a full person by society. And so much is at stake when we don't sort of fully see each other. And so that was kind of always in the back of my mind, of trying to articulate the meaning of power with that.
And so in the film, he comes across as just like an incredibly thoughtful, sweet, disciplined, humble. Everybody, we can keep a secret, right? Is that what he's like?
Pretty much. I mean, we didn't get into it. He's a Christian, and he was raised Christian, family values, etc., and all that. And you met his grandma, Candy. You met his mom. I mean, it's like we could have gone much further with that, and his cousins and all that. That's very much a part of like who he is and his values. And I haven't been around like a ton of celebrities, but sort of being in the company with Ryan, I've been exposed to some, and you can kind of sniff out the authenticity. And there are signs, and one of the first signs was when I met him for the first time. He looked me directly in the eye. He's very present, and he got so animated when we started talking about not his career as an NBA superstar, but about Davidson. He brought out his phone, and he showed me some of those videos that you guys saw of like the Davidson show and him horsing around with his college friends. And that's when I knew, like, oh, this is really the heart of the movie. And then I realized that Jay Rich, who was on his team, was still a part of his orbit, that he had stayed in close touch with a lot of these people who made this difference and helped him kind of come of age, that he had stayed in touch with them, and that spoke a lot to his character.
My nephew's here, who went to Davidson around this time.
Oh, I heard about that. Where's our Davidson person? There he is.
The decision to sort of interweave the Davidson story with the Verite story, was that always the conception, or did you discover that in the edit? Or, I mean, it's amazing that the Verite story worked out so well. It's like the documentary gods really smiled on you.
Yeah. Oh.
That sets the mood nice.
No, well, actually, it's two things happened. My microphone turned on,
Yeah,
and the jazzy music kind of on. Lily, maybe you can. Oh, hi. How you doing? I don't know what the music is all about, but you know, I can continue. But it's related, now it's gone. So so like we did not know that they were going to win the NBA championship. We didn't engineer that.
Order that
And
up,
people
yeah.
take for granted, like people think documentaries like, oh yeah, that was always going to be the plan. You know, no. Many things happen in the making of nonfiction that you have to sort of adjust and adapt. And originally, even though I did tell the whole team, I was like, let's just keep our eye on the season and keep that in our back pocket and see what happens. But it was really much more oriented around the Davidson story. And we interviewed like, you know, 20 or so super fans from Davidson, because what Steph did at Davidson had such an impact on that community, a community that had never really been seen before, a community that took great pride in who they were, their academic programs, their sports programs, but they're like an afterthought, you know? And so Steph allowed them to kind of be seen for the first time. And when we started talking to people who remembered that run, they just lit up and got, just were telling stories and stories and stories. And so that's, the film is gonna be much more oriented around that. And then when they won the championship, we literally had to sort of restructure the whole film. But J.D. Marlowe, our editor, the first time I saw him do that sort of intercut thing with Steph when he was younger and when he was older, it kind of gave me chills. And just the match cuts and the way it all kind of dovetailed together. And then him also getting the, fulfilling his degree requirements. We didn't think that was going to happen. We weren't seeing him studying, and this isn't going to happen. He had tried to do it before during the NBA lockout. He couldn't do it, and we didn't. The one regret that I have in the movie is that we didn't fully show you how busy this guy is. He's like a working NBA superstar. He's running his nonprofit. He's shooting Subway commercials. He's a dad. He's a husband, and he somehow is juggling all this. Throw the, getting the camps, getting his degree into it. It was,
Makes us all seem pretty lazy.
yeah, I don't know how he did it, but the way all that sort of came together and dovetailed narratively was quite remarkable, and it's not something that we thought was going to happen.
Well, and you mentioned at the beginning that this movie is different. I don't know if you all have seen Pete's other movies, but I mean, The Waiting Room is just tremendous. The Force is great. I mean, the trilogy, you're a real amazing, just an amazing filmmaker. But this is very different from in style. How did that feel to sort of exercise a different part of your brain and to kind of try something that was formally very different?
I mean, I knew when I decided to partner up with Ryan that we were going to be doing more commercial stuff. It was something that and broadly speaking, in the market right now, I came out of film school in '99. When it was really hard to get people to go watch a documentary. The people who were watching documentaries were like the hardcore lovers of documentary. What's happened in those intervening years is that audiences have discovered nonfiction, and it's a beautiful thing. But the challenge is that a lot of sort of mass audiences what do they want? They want true crime, they want celebrities and stuff like that. And so I did have to sort of really pause for a moment and say, is this something that I can, is going to feel meaningful to me? Is this something that, what will I learn, from this process, and therefore what is the audience going to learn? I'm always thinking about that when, I have to decide to dedicate at least a year and a half, if not more, of my life, sometimes 2, 3, 4 years, being with a film that I'm gonna hopefully one day take out to audiences. But we saw, a kernel of those themes in there, a story about community, a story about family, the power of mentorship that was very much present in all of my prior work.
I definitely have thought about a number of scenes many times since watching it. One in particular is when he's telling the story of the Davidson coach at his house, and that his mom said like, oh, well, we're gonna beef him up, you know, in time for the thing, and the coach is like, we want him just the way he is. And when he tells that story, you could see his throat catches with the emotion, and it was, for me as a dad, I was like, don't forget that that's how you're supposed to be.
Well, you know, and I talk a lot at screenings. It is an inspirational story about someone overcoming doubt or overcoming their own limitations, both internally but externally. But it's also, you know, a reminder of the power of mentorship, and I think we take for granted the impact that we have on young people in our lives, or people in our lives that may need a boost, and that was sort of represented by not just his parents, because your parents are, you know, to some degree supposed to be supportive, although it's not always the case, so it's tough love or whatever. But you know, Coach McKillop, as we got to know him, and as we, during the interviews and sort of even listening back to the interviews, it was really powerful. And it's not just Steph Curry. So many athletes, and Steph was the first athlete that Coach McKillop had not graduated. Of all the student athletes that he coached, they all graduated, and Steph was the only one. And we couldn't quite get that into the film, but when they didn't let him hang, Davidson wouldn't allow his jersey to be hung until he sacified the requirements of his degree, and then Coach McKillop actually retired that season. That was his last season coaching Davidson. So that'll have to be in the recut director's version.
On the DVD, you can put that on the director's commentary,
Yeah.
the DVD.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a lot of questions, but let's open it up now.
Well, two questions. One's very simple. What did he get the degree in? And two, did you know that, you know, besides, I think, the mentor and the parents, I think there was a greater sense of a team than I have seen in a lot of other basketball films, where there's always that one player, he's the tallest, he's the biggest, he's the strongest, you know, he's the LeBron James or Magic Johnson. And this was one where, even though Steph Curry is the one who shines, there really was a sense of a team with the other players, and I really felt that, and I'm not a big sports film guy, but that really affected me in a way that I hadn't seen in some other films.
Yeah, we noticed that. First of all, sociology, and he one of his big issues is, you know, women's equity in sports, and that's something that he works on professionally. And he, I can't remember. I think it was his advisor kind of guided him toward that. She was like, "You're working on this anyway," and so like, why don't we incorporate that into the degree plan? And then we just noticed that very much so, and both in the footage that we were watching, the archival, but also just in talking. One of the beauties of documentary work isn't just the joy of sharing a film with people, but it's getting to meet all kinds of amazing people and the Davidson community, and hearing about that team through different people's perspective was quite remarkable. And we got to meet and interview all the former teammates of Steph, and we knew that was important to Steph, that not everybody's gonna become a Steph Curry, but we're all gonna take that shot, you know, and it's always gonna be hanging up there in the air, and sometimes it's gonna fall and sometimes it's not, you know. And what, you know, the way that they kind of supported him, Jay Rich was the one who took that shot. It wasn't
Right.
Steph, and I think that was the first time that Steph has watched that kind of slow down like that, and I don't think Jay Rich had watched that since it happened. So that was very emotional, and you saw the emotion on the screen, and it wasn't so much. The thing that got me was him saying, you know, it wasn't that we lost, is that this was the last time we were going to play together, and that was very powerful. And that was sort of a, you know, very much we felt that was going to be a universal sort of, that the audience would connect with that, you know. So.
Hey, first of all, great film. Tearjerker to some extent for me. Did you guys at all interview maybe the guys I don't know how many are still around from the '69 team and how they viewed what they were doing.
That was actually super interesting. Actually, I was thinking about my friend Ben Proudfit over here when we were watching that footage. Ben made this amazing documentary called The Queen of Basketball. Sorry, I'm making it about you now, Ben. You know, which is an incredible use of archival, and I love archival, and I also love reframing stories from the past, and it was tempting to sort of go down that road in a different film, a little bit more oriented around the sort of Davidson story. We might have done that, but we didn't. We were more actually trying to find people who were connected to Steph. There was some pressure to put some like famous people in the movie. So like we interviewed Allen Iverson, we interviewed Muggsy Bogues, and Muggsy was actually connected to the family in Toronto, played with Steph's dad, Del. We were gonna interview Drake, because Drake knows the family in Toronto. But all the decisions that we sort of make, whether it's to put a celebrity in the film or not, have to serve the story. So Reggie Miller made it in there because he was there the night that, you know, Steph broke that record, and so organically it felt authentic and earned, as opposed to just stalking the movie with celebrities. But that absolutely is a fascinating story and could be another film.
Thank you so much. It was amazing. I was like clapping, like as if the game were happening. I'm a big basketball fan. I just have a question about the title. What came first, the film or the title? Like, how did you come up with the title?
Well, underrated is like it's part of his brand,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also part of his identity. And you know, I actually had some like trepidation. Is that the right word on that title? Because it is part of his sort of brand world, and it just felt like, you know, his company's involved in it. This is something that a lot of documentary filmmakers just shy away from. They don't want the subject of the film being involved at all in the movie or having any kind of influence on the movie. So we did have to navigate that, but what we discovered in talking to Steph is that it's like a seriously psychological like condition. Like he believes deeply, and you will not convince him otherwise, that he was underrated, is underrated, and always will be underrated. It's like deeply embedded in his psyche, and they talk about this like babyface assassin thing. That's where that comes from, and it's because he believes it. And I've gotten in some like little parries with some journalists and people question, you know, or you see on some of the best reviews of this movie, by the way, are on TikTok. Like, are there any like professional reviews in here? I'm not like trying to like say you guys are you know irrelevant, but the TikTok reviewers, the people on TikTok are like super fans. They break the film down and they have very strong opinions. And this was something that a lot of people sort of talked about.
I think that happens with documentaries all the time, right? Isn't that-
Now more than ever. It's actually kind of fun. But he you know, he was the son of an NBA superstar. He had all the, you know, grew up a wealthy kid, had all the advantages in the world, yet he was still not recruited by one, except for Davidson, Division I college, which is really quite shocking, given what he accomplished in high school, which was extraordinary, and given who his father was, he was still, it was the optics of like looking at him and seeing this kid who looked like he's like 12. You know, skinny kid, and so that sort of really burrowed into his psyche and is now part of his identity. It's also part of his sort of forward-facing brand and all
But
that.
I like the way you have in the film that if the coach hadn't put him in the game, then like the second game, like that the coach did underrate him. So that's his thing
Yeah,
too.
I mean, the guy, he had like 13 or some like turnovers against Eastern Michigan. I mean, it took a lot of guts for actually and if he was at Duke, he would not have gone back in. His career probably would have been over, possibly. You know, so you know, no, would not have happened.
Any logical code.
Nope.
Yeah, you mentioned this is a very different film than your previous films. I'm wondering what did you learn while making this film that you'll take with you for your future films?
Always hire a good editor. No, I mean, I think it's good as an artist. I mean, some artists are dogmatic, auteurs, to their form and to their style. some of my favorite artists, Miles Davis comes to mind, are constantly shape-shifting and pushing themselves and, you know, being uncomfortable. And the reality is, like, we're in a marketplace now where, you know, we're gonna have more and more documentaries that need to be true crime or need to be celebrity documentary or what have you. And I like the idea of Trojan horses, like finding a way of you know, still valuing story, even if it is like a genre kind of approach, that we can still make meaningful stories that are about something, and push yourself within a form to try something a little bit different. And that's that. I'm not saying I'm gonna run out and do another celebrity documentary necessarily, but you know, it helped me think about. I've never really worked with archival in that way. It helped me think about, you know, the authenticity of an interview that interviews. A lot of verite filmmakers look down on interviews, you know, but you know, an interview can be extremely powerful if there's an authenticity there and there's a orientation where you're having a conversation that's coming from a real place. It will be felt, you know, and absorbed by the audience as well.
Yeah, you briefly mentioned something on my mind. It's like, how did you navigate? I mean, he's a big brand, you know, he has a public image, and you're a very independent, you know, an auteur filmmaker. How did those two things come together, and how much influence did he have on what the final product was?
It's very difficult, like all of that. And he did not have any influence. He looked at one cut. It was more Aisha. Like, she was like, "You need to take that shot out." Not looking good right there. She didn't want to be in the film. I mean, there would have been more Aisha in there. I remember the first day we were at the house and we were filming with Steph, and she walked down the stairs and gave us like devil eyes because she did not know that we were gonna be there. I was like, Steph, did you think you didn't like let Aisha know that like the crew's here? And so it didn't get off to a totally good start. And I wanted her to be in the movie because because she's her own person. She was, you know, when they met, and narratively she didn't fit into it because they started dating that the year after the events took place. But you know, she wanted to be an actor. She's got her cooking thing. She has aspirations, but she's always lived in his shadow, and she's underrated in her own way. And so I wanted to really explore that, but that wasn't meant to be. And then, you know, his business partner, Eric Payton, would tell me, "Pete, oh yeah, you have full access. Just go over his house anytime. Just show up." He lives in Atherton, which actually is quite accessible. There's like, there is a gate, but you can almost like look over the fence and see his house. I was like, "Eric, you're crazy." Because you cannot get near him without it being scheduled. He has someone who schedules his day to the minute, and in meetings, and this is another thing I regret to make it in the film, but they talk about him in the third person, and they call him the asset. They said, "Okay, between 2 and 2:30, we have to maximize the asset. How are we going to do that, sir?" And that's it. And if you fit into that plan, great. And then we couldn't get access to the Warriors because, like, Steve Kerr stick during the season, and he doesn't want the distraction. And Steph didn't want like a crew, like this thing about him to be a distraction from his part of the team. And so we had to operate within those restrictions. And then you could only 10% of the movie or less could be shot in an NBA stadium because the NBA owns the rights to anything shot, even in the parking garage. And so we found that out kind of like later in the process, after we had shot many terrific scenes.
Oh no.
And we were like, "Oh man, like, Ryan, can't you call like Adam Silver or something?" No. So, because then they will get involved, and they will have editorial control and all that. So, and he was originally a producer on the film, and it was a very difficult conversation, but we had asked him to remove himself as producer because I was like, I can't. Just the optics of that are not going to be good. And so he, you know, understood, and to his credit, they didn't change anything in the film except for the one shot of Aisha. and they allowed me to sort of do what I wanted to do and tell the story the way I wanted to tell it. And there weren't celebrities in the movie, and they wanted, you know, that for the trailer. And I think the Magic Johnson documentary, it's like a murderer's row of celebrities talking about how great he is. And that's cool for what that is.
Right.
But to me, that wasn't what was going to make a meaningful film. And so,
Did you know that he was a good guy? Like, I mean, obviously he has a reputation as that, but what would you have done if you were in the movie and you're like, this guy's a monster? How would you handle that given the challenges?
that's a
Yeah.
damn good question, Marshall.
Don't have to worry about it.
It does happen. I mean, there's like crazy stuff that happens in documentaries, like where we were talking about it earlier, you get to the end of your film and somebody that you've been following with the camera for a year decides they don't want to be in the movie. What do you do? Well, you signed a release. I'm sorry. Well, I'm uncomfortable, or like this is going to hurt me, and I changed my mind. You know, what do you do? You know, these are the ethical and sort of practical dilemmas that we face, and I could only imagine that you would have to sort of engage that situation the best you can, and it's definitely happened. There are films increasingly that are partnerships between filmmakers and subjects where there's debates and things have to get sort of worked out. Luckily, that didn't happen in this case.
Before your editor showed you the intercut past and present, what did you thought would be the structure, and what were the challenges?
Well, we knew we were going to have to sort of deal with the fact that they won the NBA championship. We could not ignore it, you know, but we knew we could, you know, sort of structurally, and some of the TikTok reviewers had some spicy things to say. Most people love the film, but it's a little bit abrupt. The same thing happened in my movie, The Force, which was about the Oakland Police Department, and we filmed with them for 2 years. And we had a whole film. We were going to the Sundance Edit Lab, and at the 11th hour, a scandal broke out at the police department, and it was like the sex scandal. I don't know if anybody's followed the story in the Bay Area, and it was a profoundly damaging event. And we had to recut the whole movie, and this was kind of a similar thing. Like, they won the championship, and so then we had to sort of like land on that, and then we had to get from like the Davidson, you know, his junior year at Davidson, that was one shot, by the way, his junior year. If you guys noticed that, everything started becoming compressed, and we were worried that would be that the audience would have trouble with that. But those are just sort of the decisions that you made. And then JD, I think, when he discovered that sort of match cut, it helped synthesize the whole thing in a way that I think helped that sort of transition, because it was pretty rapid. We banged through like 3 championships in like 7 seconds or something like that. So it was pretty remarkable actually how he edited that and made it feel cohesive and sort of part of a larger story. And I think that edit really kind of helped.
Last question.
So, I'm the Davidson kid, so I'm gonna ask the Davidson question. I was really interested.
I think I saw you on TikTok. Now I remember. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I was really interested in like the compare and contrast throughout the whole film. You know, like the one shot where we talked about where like he's taking the same shot in the same area, and you're cutting between the 2 time periods. But also like the compare and contrast of like the Golden State, you know, the visuals like establishing shots and stuff, and then like the Davidson establishing shots and like the
Yeah.
environments that you're using to sort of set up the scenes
Mhm.
around that. I'm really curious about like how you were building that out, particularly as someone who is more familiar. It sounds like more familiar with the, you know, Golden State side.
It's a great question, and we would have, you know, the Warriors moved from Oakland to San Francisco, and this was not something that people in Oakland were radically happy about. And there's so many similarities, like between, I mean, they're radically different places, Davidson and Oakland, California, but there's also a lot of kind of similarities. There's how the community, the passion of the community, the relationship between, yeah, all that. And what we would have done more is juxtapose sort of the story of Oakland with the story of Davidson, and how Steph had this impact on both places in a similar way. That would have been a really remarkable sort of way to sort of tie to my work in Oakland together with the story of this athlete. San Francisco just doesn't quite have that thing, you know. So we did it a little bit, but it just wasn't. We had this phenomenal interview with Marcus Thompson, who writes for The Athletic, who's a Oakland sports writer, and it was a beautiful interview, but it just didn't fit into sort of how the story unfolded. And those are just the choices that you have to make. That you know, I could probably cut 2 other films out of sort of the foundation of what this is that would be different and meaningful. So.
Do you get to do that in a DVD?
I mean, I don't know if they make DVDs. I think it could be
Put it
that'd
up
be
on
a
TikTok,
TikTok
though.
thing.